Well, hello, everyone. Thank you for joining us. Hi, Cassie. Very nice to meet you. Thank you for joining us. Janice, thanks for being here today. Have your questions ready, because remember, this is an open mic session. It's a Q&A session. Hey, Jackie, great to have you. Thanks for joining us. Dan, always so supportive, Dan. Thank you for being part of the conversation. Looking forward to getting your perspectives today. Jeff, thank you again for joining us. Jorge, welcome. Kelly, thank you for being with us today. Pete, you're such a loyal supporter, Pete. Keep asking us those great questions. Well, hello to you too, Laura. Thank you for coming. I know that there's a lot of things that you've been thinking about lately, so let's make sure that we share those as it relates to what it means to be a leader that embraces employee engagement, and just how those terms have actually, they mean something differently in the age of personalization. We'll discuss that too. Michael, thank you so much for joining us. So before we get started, I'd like to just welcome everyone to the Leadership in the Age of Personalization live stream. You know, whether you're joining us live from Zoom or YouTube, I'm Glenn Yopes, and on behalf of GLLG, thanks for taking the time to enjoy this live session so that we could all learn from Marty Glaske about what employee engagement really means. Now, I'd like to remind everyone that this is an open conversation. And if you're joining us from Zoom, please feel free to submit your questions and thoughts and ideas, using the Q&A button. And if you're watching us from YouTube, please submit your comments via chat. We have GLLG staff that is organizing the flow of questions to ensure that we can all address your thoughts with an open mic. And again, we welcome you to subscribe to our YouTube channel and social media at Glenn Yopes so that you can be in touch with our most recent content about leadership in the age of personalization. Now, on our last live session, we introduced and made the big announcement that our 2021 Leadership in the Age of Personalization Summit was going to take place and will take place on October 21st in Las Vegas, Nevada. We certainly hope that you'll join us. It'll be a live session, but also it will be broadcasted. And last year we had our summit in partnership with Fairfield University, and we all learned how the collapse of standardization was being revealed as we all learned through many different intimate things as a result of the pandemic. And as we move into 2021, we're taking it to another level. See, in 2020, it was about how we recognize that regardless of what sector you're in, we're all solving for the same things, just packaged differently. We use different vernacular, different words. We have a different language. And so we've been so constrained by standardization to stay in our lanes that we never really realized that we have other people outside of our sector that are dealing with the same issues. And so we need to now be more mindful of how to co-design into the future. Now, as you're going to see in this upcoming teaser video, the theme for 2021 is really focused on individuality unleashed. And I don't think anybody on this call can dispute that you as a leader and or your organizations are now solving for the things that really matter to the most critical stakeholders, our employees, our patients, our customers, our employees. So to give you a little snapshot of that teaser video, let's roll it. Again, to learn more about the 2021 Leadership in the Age of Personalization Summit, please go to ageofpersonalization.com. How do you engage employees? How do you inspire teams to produce at their highest levels? How do you motivate employees? I've been writing for Forbes.com for 12 years. And if you can believe it, these are the three things that most leaders are searching for when reading my articles for answers. These three questions: engaging employees, engaging teams, and inspiring and motivating people to make sure that they can get their fullest capacity and so that they can contribute at their highest levels. I'd like to introduce you now to Marty Glaske to discuss these questions and many others. You see, Marty is the Senior Vice President of Client Development at Gafcon, a San Diego-based organization whose expertise is in managing complex design and construction activities. Let's roll it. Marty.
Glenn, good afternoon.
Hey, welcome to the show, man. Good to have you.
Hey, thank you. Great to be here.
Well, first of all, before we start talking about how we engage with employees, how do you engage with fish? You told me that you love fly fishing with your wife. Tell me where you do it, and tell me what's the biggest fish you've caught in the last 2 years.
Oh, what a fantastic way to start off with my most favorite thing to do. Yeah, fly fishing is such an amazing a form of engagement with the fish in the river, right? So one of the main places we like to go is Oak Creek in Sedona. It's a wonderful setting up there. It's all natural. You get a lot of hiking in, and you really get to be one with the nature and engage with what you're doing. The biggest fish I've caught out of there probably is about 16-inch brown trout about 1.5 years ago.
Wow, that's impressive. Yeah. That's impressive. What color was it? Brown trout. Okay, got it. Sorry, I didn't hear you. So Marty, look, I think it's important for people to understand how they can be discovered, because we often think that we have to follow these standardized rules, these predefined metrics for success to help us get to where we think that we need to go in our careers. And just to, in the spirit of keeping it real, Marty, you and I actually met because I saw a post on LinkedIn that someone wrote about you, about why you're so good at understanding the nuance and the importance of employee engagement. In fact, they tagged you with one of my old Forbes articles. And I thought, wait a second, I don't think I've ever met Marty before. No. But if you're going to get that kind of raving review on LinkedIn, I think I'll reach out. And the rest is history. So Marty, what does that say, that little story say about how it's the smallest things that can get us noticed?
Yeah, that's a great story. And that is how we met. Actually, I did a podcast with a construction influencer on engagement and how to engage employees and clients. And it's funny how that started. I'm going to digress a little bit and tell you how that relationship started. One of the big things that I like to do as a leader in engaging clients and people is I write handwritten letters. I try to write 4 to 6 a day, believe it or not. And they're letters that encompass everything. I look on LinkedIn and I may see you did a Forbes article and I send you a handwritten letter saying, Glenn, read your article, fantastic, great information, really motivated me. And actually the construction influencer put a post on LinkedIn that really got me thinking. And I sent her a note saying, fantastic post, interesting information. And she reached out to me and said, not many people engage with me in personal letters anymore. Let's chat. So, we sat down for an hour and chatted about engagement and chatted about personalization and how I look at engagement, culture, and how I communicate with people. So yeah, and then it kind of blew up on LinkedIn from there. And then she tagged you and I together, and here we are.
And here we are. So Marty,
Here we are.
let's get this thing going now. What does employee engagement mean to you?
Well, Glenn, I thought we only had an hour, right? I think a better question is which might be easier to answer is what is an employee engagement? Employee engagement to me is everything. Employee engagement sets the tone of a corporation, sets the tone of a company, sets the tone of how you're going to be a leader. And it really sets the tone of the understanding the relationship between an employee and an employer, and it identifies and encourages employee actions, and it enhances the corporation. It does, engagement and culture is everything to a company, and engagement could be anything from a phone call, an email, a handwritten letter, but really engagement is everything to the success of a company.
So, so many people are wondering, how do I engage with my employees? I mentioned that earlier from the analytics. Why do you think people are still asking this question, Marty?
I thought about that the other day when we were talking about that. It's because I think it's really easy to understand what engagement is, but it's not that easy to be engaged and have sustainable engagement on a macro level within an organization. I think people struggle with that because engagement means so many different things to so many different people. And what really needs to be done as a leaders, we need to identify our engagement strategy and understand if that strategy works, and then sustain that engagement. And there is a secret sauce to engagement, and I'm going to tell everybody here what that secret sauce is. And my wife and I talk about this quite a bit. You have to be authentic and you have to be sincere, because if you're not either of those, engagement won't go anywhere.
Well, that's true. And if you even go back to this point around why people keep asking this question, because see, in the age of standardization, there were always these predefined ways on how to engage. But what's happened now is that they're starting to realize that those things just don't work anymore. Mm-hmm. People want their leaders to make it personal. How do we do that in a way that makes the employee actually believe that your intentions are genuine and true?
Yeah, follow the secret sauce, right? You got to be sincere and authentic. Number one, because employees can read right through the BS of a non-sincere and authentic engagement strategy. And I think looking at your discussion about personalization is you've got to get to know the employees, you've got to get to know the staff, you've got to understand what makes them tick and what they're looking for within the organization. I just saw somebody which posted a question or a comment, which is entirely correct. Engagement is not a one size fits all. Engagement depends on what your strategy is and what's sustainable and what your staff, employees, coworkers, clients, and relationships require and want.
So how do you scale that when you have so many different people? Because in the age of standardization, everybody was viewed through the lens of sameness, and that's not the case anymore.
Yeah, it's tough. It's definitely not easy. It's a juggling act. It's really understanding what each person within the community, within your organization is looking for, and getting an overall understanding of it and trying to engage with that overall understanding. It's not always going to be perfect. It's not always going to be right, but you learn from that, and you understand what engagement does work and what doesn't. And you've just, again, it's work. It's sustainable engagement. You've got to understand your audience. You've got to understand what everybody is looking for in that engagement platform.
So we have a question that just come up for you. And this is from Jorge. Jorge, would you like to go on the open mic and share your perspectives? I know you know a thing or two about engagement. Jorge, would you like to speak on the open mic? Okay. So Jorge will hopefully.
Oh, here we go. Can you hear me now?
Yep, perfectly. Hi, Jorge. Thanks for joining us.
Hi, how are you? Sorry, I was on, I was trying to get myself unmuted. Marty, good to meet you, by the way. Glenn and I go way back as well. Someday we'll share that story with you. But as I was, when you talk about engagement, when you talk about really having that dialogue with employees. It will lead, in most cases, to a couple of different things. Certainly, it leads to mutual trust, which I think is critically important. But it can also lead on a much broader scale. It really leads to enhancing the culture of your organization, whatever that organization may be. So I think it's from that perspective, you have two critical components of how important engagement can be, not only individually at an individual level, but also an organizational level overall.
Yeah, and that's fantastic observation. Trust is everything, and it goes back to the secret sauce of authentic and sincere. They have to trust that that engagement is coming from the right place, and it's coming from an engagement strategy of caring, an engagement strategy of personalization, and an engagement strategy of what can I do for you to ensure you're getting what you need to ensure you are doing your best for our organization. It's a tree.
Yeah, very good, Marty. And thank you, Jorge, for your comments. And hopefully you'll come back a little bit later on in the show. Now, Marty, one thing that's come up here through chat is that something that now has seemed to have become a common conversation around engagement, which is all around this notion of vulnerability. Now, I'm not going to ask you to define vulnerability, but I'd like to ask you to give us an example. Share a story, the one that you shared with me, when maybe you were sending emails too late at night and they taught you a lesson.
Yeah, a moment of self-awareness, right? So yeah, I work a lot in my position. I work a lot. I work in evenings. I work early mornings and weekends. And one evening at like 7:30 in the evening, I was working on a proposal and working on some things. I started emailing somebody and started texting, and I'm stomping around the house going, why isn't this person emailing me? Why aren't they responding? I'm working so hard. Why are they not committed? Why are they not engaged in this process? And my wife's looking at me, shaking her head, going, you're not getting it. And I'm like, I'm getting it. They should be responding. And then the employee called me and said, Marty, it's 7:30 at night. I've got kids. I'm eating dinner. You're giving me anxiety, right? You're giving me so much anxiety around this. And I said, and I'm like, boom, self-awareness. What am I doing in walking around the office, preaching engagement and culture and then I'm sitting there at 7:30 upset that an employee isn't responding immediately. So as I said, it gave me an opportunity to become self-aware that even as leaders who think we know engagement and think we understand that we're doing everything right, that sometimes we need to take a step back and take a deep breath and say, be more self-aware of what's going on, understand the live-work balance. And it really gave me a learning opportunity. And I quite frankly changed my strategy. I don't bug people in the evening unless it's an emergency, no more weekend stuff. It's really understanding that engagement to them is something different than engagement to me on these types of items. So yeah, self-aware learning opportunity there, that even though I claim to understand engagement and understand, the employee, what they need and there's times where we don't. And we need to take a step back as leaders and just take a deep breath and say, we've got to understand that everybody else has things going on at the same time you do.
It's a great story, Marty. And part of what I enjoy doing on these shows, and this is, what happens when you lead in the age of personalization, is how do we try to seek some discomfort? So here we go. See, the story that you shared was extraordinarily meaningful. I'm sure people learned from it. But what they're also learning is that you don't have work-life balance, that you yourself, as you said, are working all the time. Now, by the way, that's how I am too. So I would only share that with you if I feel like I do too much of it myself. And what I continue to learn, especially from these younger generations, is that, look, work isn't everything. I've got other priorities in my life. And what I'm really starting to learn, that if I don't start prioritizing my life, then how are my own employees perceiving me as their leader? Is it just always work, work, work? I mean, my whole point in this is I get our generation was designed to work, work, work until you couldn't work anymore. But I think now it's a two-way street. We're being evaluated just by our employees, just as much as we're trying to evaluate ourselves and the perception that we're trying to pass along to our employees. Don't you think perception and how people perceive you as a leader is another dimension of employee engagement?
100%. And to add on to that story, the next day I actually called her and said, I want to apologize. That was not a way a leader should act, and that was not a way we should be engaging. And I told her it was a very self-aware moment, and I'm changing my strategy here. So thank you. She said, thank you. That is really sincere, because I worry about it when I get emails from you and text messages and phone calls, and it's Saturday morning at 8 a.m. And she goes, and I worry for you, that you're doing so much work or working so much. And we all do, like you said, Glenn, we're kind of programmed to do that. And she said, you need to identify it as a leader. You need to take time off too for your mental, physical, and emotional well-being.
Well, on that note, we have a younger generation that has a question for you. Pete, let's hear your thoughts on the open mic for Marty Glaske.
Hi, Glenn. Hi, Marty. I just wanted to ask you, Marty, how do you balance engaging employees and respecting their work-life boundaries with maintaining the high productivity of your company, especially when there's pressure from above you, from your boss, to increase productivity of the company? So how do you say, okay, I shouldn't reach out on the weekends or past dinner time, if you need to get a project done or you have something at the office that needs to get done? How do you balance that respect and the productivity?
Yeah, great question, Pete. And Glenn, I just want to clarify something. I'm not that old, right? We're not that old, are we?
No, we're not. Of course not.
Good.
No,
good, good.
Of course not. Sorry. I didn't want to leave
you're
that.
only as old as you feel. Pete, fantastic question. And I struggle with that, and all leaders struggle with that. But it comes down to a couple things. It comes down to understanding deadlines, understanding what needs to be done, pre-positioning, pre-planning, and working with the strategy with your employees and with the company, that we're not scrambling at the very last minute. And especially in my industry, that's not always an available opportunity. I mean, we get a lot of RFPs that are due in a week. We get calls from clients saying, can you do this? And so, when we can, we strategize, we understand, we set up a clear and concise timetable for when things are done and when they're due. Now, things pop up, and we have to do things over the weekend. We have to do things, overnight, and that it's happened. I mean, a couple months ago, I was up on a Saturday morning at 3:30 a.m. writing content for a proposal with a whole team of people. And we understand that should not be the norm. That should be the exception. And when things do happen like that, we really focus on the employee well-being. We take a look at after action report. We give them time off if need be. We give them spot bonuses. We work with them to understand, what their needs are after that. And so, it's a really big balance, making sure that we're profitable and we're meeting our deadlines and expectations. So it's really, as a manager in my industry, is pre-planning, understanding, and setting clear expectations of what needs to be done in as an organization and within each one of our divisions.
Well, and thank you for the question, Pete. All these things are very personal, aren't they? And part of what I'm learning, and I continue to learn in studying organizations, especially as they're trying to work out of this pandemic, which, by the way, as many people are starting to think, like, whew, glad that's over. The hard work really begins. And I think part of the question that Pete asked you, that I've been grappling with is, if we're really going to be about health and well-being in our workplaces, something's got to give. Because let's face it, all the work-life balance initiatives of the past failed us. And I only say they failed us, not that they all failed, but if it didn't create critical mass, sorry, it didn't work. And so here we are, we're at a stage now where we know the importance of one's financial, social, physical, and mental well-being. How are we going to create balance? And I think that these are systemic issues that, look, corporations didn't, when they were designed, they weren't accounting for these kind of things. They looked at health and well-being as be fortunate that you have a benefits plan. The world has changed. So I don't know if you have a perspective on this, Marty. I know we didn't plan on this, but don't you think that it's time that we rethink the ways we work? Because you know what, Marty, you're young, but you may not last if you're working that hard.
Yeah. Yeah, I think you're right, Glenn. The paradigm has shifted. I mean, and I think the COVID and the difference over the last year and a half has really exposed some weaknesses within organizations, has really exposed that a lot of what we talk about or organizations talk about is lip service. I mean, if we look at the engagement and we look at the work-life balance and we look at that, it's just it's supposedly it's better. I'm not sure if it is. It's got to be identified. It's got to be taken a look at. We've got to sit back and we've got to reassess and readjust for how we're going to address that as the shift comes in. We've lost personal interaction. We've lost team building. We've lost activities that we do. We've lost the fact of, maybe on a Thursday night, I would have gone to a happy hour with the team as opposed to working. Maybe on a weekend, we would have gone to Habitat for Humanity, or we would have done the Mud Run or the Susan G. Komen event. All these different events and activities that bring us away from work, it's not there anymore. And working from home, I think, is another real paradigm shift of work-life balance, because before we'd work, from 7 to 4, 7 to 4:30 or 5, we'd go home, dinner. In our mind, we wouldn't think about jumping back on the computer and working, and I can do a couple more hours. Now with our offices at our houses, for most of us, it's so easy to have dinner and sit there, and instead of going for a walk with your partner, your wife, your husband, whatever, you go back to the office and you start working. Then all of a sudden it's Saturday morning and you realize you've worked 65 hours that week, and where did that time go? So yeah, I think we're super vulnerable right now in a real time where we as leaders have to really identify what our engagement strategy is when we look at bringing people back to the office. And because I think the engagement strategy is going to change. People are going to have different expectations, different thought processes, and very much different needs than they had before.
Well, as you've shared with me, Marty, we have to start listening, but stop dictating. And so clearly, employee expectations have permanently changed. Where do you think that the biggest impact of this change will appear?
I think the biggest impact as a leader, I'm going to look at it in two different ways. I'm going to look at it as a leadership and as an employee within an organization. I think the biggest impact as leaders is we're going to have to reassess and readjust, as I said, and we're going to have to spend a lot more time understanding how the culture and how the engagement is changing. And I think as employees, as they go through this, they're going to have to be more vocal. There's going to have to be more communication and more understanding of what they're looking for and what they're expecting out of the organization and out of the leaders. So I think I really feel like within our company, we're going to see a lot more interaction. We're going to see a lot more communication, and we're going to be able to kind of set expectations of what the staff is looking for and what the management is looking for. And I don't think we can get around that at this point.
Well, it's interesting you bring this up, because the other day I had a conversation with an executive who said, Glenn, how do you create a culture in this world where it's going to become more remote? How do we do it? And I said, well, first of all, there is no one way to do it. But let's talk about some perspective. Number one, when's the last time you revisited your mission, vision, values? We did that about 3 years ago. We're good there. Well, wait a second.
Right.
What changed in 3 years? Like, what do you mean you're good there? And number two is, what do your employees think? In other words, what is it that they're now expecting? And based on those expectations, how should your mission, vision, and values adapt to the new expectations? And then to sustain it, you're going to have to do something that, quite candidly, you haven't done a very good job of. That's listening and listening and listening, and taking more time to speak and engage with your employees so that they can feel that they're contributing to the organization's future. What are your thoughts on that, Marty?
Difficult and crucial conversations, right? Two things that we're going to see a lot more of this year, and we discussed that as a leadership team here, is, the mission vision on it, that's got to be an organic document that's got to be changing as we look into how the post-pandemic is going to affect us as leaders and engagement strategies. We've got to do a little bit of looking inside ourselves and really understanding us as leaders, how we're going to pivot and change to really ensure that we're meeting the and I say this right, emotional, physical, and mental well-being of the employees.
So guys,
I think
go ahead.
I was gonna say, I don't think we all really know at this point. I think we're all sitting down and trying to do the best we can, and see what we can do with engagement and see what we can do as we go back. As I keep going here, one thing we did is we understood that we were not going to have the same sort of engagement. We weren't going to have the same sort of interactions with our employees. So we kind of pivoted. It's not as good as what we had, but we started Zoom happy hours. We started Zoom trivia games. We started, weekly interactions. We started via email. We started a Monday informational newsletter. We shifted. We took a look at the paradigm. We said, how are we going to communicate and engage with the employees? And I think we did a pretty good, nimble job at doing that. But I think there's still opportunity for a little bit more success. And I think, talking to the other leaders in our industry, we're all struggling. And it's going to be interesting where we all come out of this, once we sit down and really assess our vision and mission and where we're going in 6 months and in 10 months and in a year.
Yeah, well, I love your humility with all this, because we don't have all the answers right now, and I think that's why people keep joining us. And so I like to remind everyone that this is an open mic session, open conversation. Submit your questions in the Q&A panel. We want to hear from you. In fact, I'm going to put someone that I know on the spot with the question, because I know that right now he's probably got a really good question, or at least a really good opinion. Jackie, thanks for joining us. Can I indulge you to tell us what you're thinking and feeling, and how you can help us keep this conversation going?
Well, what I'm thinking and feeling, just dealing with a very difficult time right now, just in the things that we do as leaders, and the work ethic of people not wanting to really work at this time. So it's very challenging when you talk about engagement. How do you engage people that may not really, I don't know, say don't want to be engaged, but it's just a different approach to it. I think for me, it's really, and I think authenticity is the number one thing. Being true to the people, getting people on board, teaching people, because we are dealing with a very young workforce now, and coming into the workforce that have never dealt with this type of stuff before. Then on top of just dealing with what we deal with as a any organization right now. So just staying true to yourself, a sense of calmness, keeping people calm during these types of times. Being upfront, transparent with people, as much as you possibly can. That's what we're trying to do here. I mean, it's a crisis everywhere, I think. Just trying to build your workforces up and stabilize, and very, very challenging. But you just got to stay the course, keep calm, engage by just being transparent, being yourself, and that's what I think and feel.
Jackie, I really appreciate your perspectives. And Jackie works for a large retailer, and he's part of leading a distribution center. And part of what I continue to learn, because we're all teachers and students here, Jackie, and I'd love to get your perspective on this, Marty, is we really need to recruit in an entirely different way. And it doesn't start with one's experience. It starts with that individual that you're trying to recruit to believe that you actually care about them as an individual first. Because remember, once they take the job, who are they counting on? You. And, in times past, it was all about experience and capabilities. And it's still true. I mean, you still need to understand those things. But I think what's happened is that rather than learn about the individual second, now that's the first thing that we need to do. And now when you multiply that across a workforce that may, in a DC, for example, that may have 100 employees and, part-timers and hourly people. I mean, it's a constant task to stay in touch with where they're at personally. And I think that part of why a lot of people, in my opinion, why they want to quit, why they don't want to work, besides maybe the incentives that they're given, by the government with all the COVID aid, is that they don't know what they want to do with their life. They don't know what's all this going to bring for me. And I really believe that this is an opportunity to awaken people to recognize that they can be good, if not great, individual contributors. Because, to get macro on you here, Jackie, if we're looking at the broader perspective of what's happening in the global economy, let alone here in the United States, we need people activated. We need people being able to trust the system, being able to trust leaders, being able to trust and believe that if they're going to put in a hard day of labor and work, that it's going to mean something to them. And why is that important? Because they're going to be the ones that inspire, the next generation and the next and the next. So I don't know if that provides perspective, Jackie, but Marty, I'd like for you to jump into this conversation before we say goodbye to Jackie.
Yeah, what an interesting conversation, right? The people in hiring strategies, in engagement in those hiring strategies. And Glenn, you and I kind of talked a little bit about how today's workplace is not the one our mom and dad experienced, right? We chatted about that and the differences. And if you talk to my dad or my mom, their workplace was mechanically driven, right? You had an expectation. 20 years, 9 to 5, gold watch, retire and play golf on the weekends, right? That was kind of like the American dream. That was what our mom and dad experienced. Today, employees aren't looking for a job. They're more organic. The individual's looking for an experience that creates a work-life balance. And they're looking for belonging and respect and personalization in how they work and how they interact with other people in your workspace. And when we look at our mind, it's not about the pension anymore. It's about finding something that has an environment of growth and engagement. It's such an intrinsic new hire, a new paradigm there. And I was talking to someone the other day. I was interviewing somebody, and when I interview people, I give them all about our culture, all about who we are, what we are. And at the end, I would say, do you have any questions for me? And 99% of the time, they want to expand on the culture. They want to expand on work-life balance. Where in the past, they want to expand on how much am I getting paid? Where am I working? Now it's more of an organic discussion, and it's tough for people like us who kind of grew up in the rank and file, the mechanized way, 20 years, because it's just different. And it's as leaders, we have to understand that, and we have to understand the communication style of interviews in the new workforce.
Well, I'll respond to that in a couple of quick ways. And I know we got a follow-up question from Pete. You know what? Today, when you're interviewing someone, you need to sell them just as much as they're selling you.
100%.
And it's not just selling the organization, it's selling you.
Yeah.
Selling
the experience.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
And so my whole point, it's not so much about the title or rank than it is about the individual. And the other thing I wanted to bring up, back to the data analytics and those first 3 questions that I posed at the very beginning of our session around inspiring employees, teams, and engaging employees. How about if I told you that the number 1 question asked when people are looking to read my articles on Forbes is, what is the American dream? And so when you said that earlier, I'm surprised that this isn't a bigger conversation in the things that we're talking about these days. People are in search of, well, what is it? And it's interesting to think that they're still looking for society to define it for them, when maybe they should be defining it for us. So let's go to our follow-up question from Pete. Pete, go ahead and share your thoughts on the open mic, please.
Yeah, definitely. So just going back to what I said before, and Marty, your answer was a lot of it is about setting the right deadlines and setting good expectations for your employees. And what Jorge said in the beginning about how engagement could lead to trust. I was wondering if you found that employee engagement is the key to getting employees to be intrinsically motivated to do their job at a high level. And if you could foster that culture of trust and where they feel like they're part of it, that they're contributing to the company in like a significant way, is that how you really get the most out of your team?
100%, Pete. You hit it right on the top of the nail. That's how you have to do it. You have to motivate them. You have to get that trust, to get the optimal working strategy, environment, and understanding from those employees. Yeah. Trust, engagement, personalization, autonomy, all the above. It feeds into ensuring, again, that work experience is what they're looking for. And they have to buy into it. And that motivates them to work harder and produce, and which, in turn turns into a more productive organization.
So I just want to give you some perspective here, not just to you, Marty, but to all of our participants. You've heard a couple of questions from Pete. How about if I told you that Pete is a sophomore at Fairfield University? He's still a student. So if all of these questions, if we're not already trying to figure these things out now, it's going to be impossible for people to recruit the talent that they seek. The standards and expectations are changing. In fact, I just want to make a call out to Pete, because Pete is actually going to be one of our student speakers at our 2021 summit. James Jordan, I see that you're joining us here as a participant. Tell us what you're thinking and feeling as I put you on the spot, James. What's going on? James, are you there? That's okay. He maybe
Yes.
There you are,
me okay?
James. Yeah, tell us how are you doing, James? What are you thinking and feeling from this conversation?
Well, I was just kind of drinking it all in, and trying to filter it through the lens of engaging employees when I'm the new boss, going to a new job, and trying to be authentic, and wondering if Marty has any tips or feedback on being the new guy.
Great question.
That is a tough question, knowing now that 90% of your engagement for the first 6 months is going to be via Zoom. You don't have that personal touch in the coffee room. You don't have that personal touch. I think you're going to have to focus on what we say, authenticity and sincerity through the Zoom calls. Get to know the people, and as things start opening up, really start the actual physical engagement of those employees. That's a tough one. That is a tough one.
Well, let me give you some context. So imagine that you're going and you're going to lead a new school, and now all these administrators and the students are wondering, well, who's the one in charge now?
Right.
And so, look, James, the only feedback that I can give you to this is that regardless of where you work, whether it's in a school or a corporation or in healthcare, you're about serving a community. And the faster that you can engage with the community itself. So in other words, look at this from the outside in. If you learn to engage and establish yourself within the community that your school is serving, that's, I believe, that first step towards truly building engagement and trust with those students and colleagues that you're going to be leading and setting forth a path for their future. So in short form, that's some perspective. So Marty, let's—
Glenn, I'm sorry, can I jump in one more time and
Sure.
talk a little bit that a little bit more?
Absolutely.
So, as consultants, we get new clients. We've gotten new clients during COVID. Normally with a new client, we go, we meet, we interact, we get to know each other. And then we have, PowerPoint presentation, 30, 60, 90 days, what we're going to do and all that. Now we've kind of shifted and changed that a little bit. And an example is we had a new one a couple of weeks ago, and we went in with a PowerPoint presentation, but that PowerPoint presentation was purely personal. It was purely, here's Glenn, here's a picture of his family. He likes to golf on the weekends. He really is interested in ballroom dancing. And we spent, a half an hour just telling them who we are And the client called and said, that was amazing. We got to know you through Zoom, and it made such a difference to know who you are. So, there are ways to pivot and get past that when you're new and you're going in and you can't meet in person. And, it was things, one of our PMs was loved ballet for his granddaughter and put that on the slide, and it was a conversation piece. So, if you look at it outside the box, there are ways to get around it, and there are ways to make an impact with new clients, new employees, new groups, if you personalize it and you show them the human side of who you are, as opposed to just sitting down and saying, we're a new client, 30, 60, 90, this is what we're going to do. We're going to come in and do this. We said, we're going to get there, but let me tell you who we are.
Yeah, this kind of goes back to what Jackie and James were actually alluding to earlier, is that, we are now responsible, regardless of our titles or hierarchy, to introduce our human side. Because the truth is, those titles, they don't mean so much. And you'll say, well, Glenn, of course they do. They set forth the organizational chart and they know what everybody's responsible for. And yeah, that's true. But to truly engage, people want to know who you are.
Yeah.
And people want to know the human side of what you represent. I mean, I didn't know that in that example that I was actually a ballroom dancer. No, I'm joking. I'm not. But the whole point is, there's a lot of things that, for someone like myself, that a lot of people don't know. And I made sure to make sure that they know it. I'll share one right now. I mean, I am diagnosed with anxiety, and I have to take a little bit of medication every night. And one would say, wow, he's got anxiety. You know what? This stuff is normal now. And I feel comfortable talking about it. I feel comfortable talking about the things that I don't do well, the things that I'm proud of, and my family. Why? Because it's funny. My father told me when I was a kid, don't ever be fooled by people who have all these shiny objects. They have problems too. Yep. And what we've learned the hard way is that we all do. Now, Kelly, I know you've said some great things on the chat box. Can we get you on an open mic to share those with Marty, please?
Hi, can you guys hear me?
Of course. Thanks, Kelly, for joining.
You know what? I realized I only sent it to the panelists. So I said, when Marty was talking about engaging as a new employee, I just started in March at MHP. And I said that I've been coming in, on a few days to get face mask to a few people instead of, I started writing face to face, and I realized it's actually face mask to face mask. But it has been nice to be able to come in, those few days and get some, face to face time and be able to meet the people that you're working with. And it sounds like some places are opening up a little bit more. So we'll see how things go in the next few months. But this has been great, learning more about the engaging on all levels with employees and, clients, all of that.
Well, thank you, Kelly. Let me give you some perspective. In 2020, we were all forced to wear masks. And then we all had this incredible awakening, this realization that we'd all been forced to wear masks our entire lives, and we're tired of it.
Yeah.
Did that resonate with you?
Yeah, that was an interesting. Well, so this year has been a lot different for me, but when you were talking about getting more personal with people, it's really true. I didn't realize how personal things had gotten comparatively. I was out on maternity leave for about 5 months, so it was a lot different when I came back. Well,
first of all, congratulations.
Thank you. Yes, very, very much a big joy in my life.
Well, I'm happy for you, Kelly. And this is see, look, we're having a personal conversation.
I know. I brought it there,
Kelly.
No, but you know what, Kelly? This is the way it should be. And people, we could all use all these words that people may not understand, but it's conversations and stories like these that resonate, right? And to your point, Kelly, I mean, now leaders are actually just as responsible for people's personal lives as their professional lives. And what I mean responsible for their personal lives, responsible enough to at least make those people feel that those things matter to you, and that you're there to support them in any way. So Laura, looks like you have some comments from Laura. And it would be great for you to share that on an open mic. But before you do, so get ready for that, Laura. We've got a question here from Rich Miller Murphy. Rich, my goodness, what a pleasant surprise. Thanks for joining us.
Thank you, Glenn.
Please share your question, Rich. It's so great to hear from you.
Let me see if I can go back to it. So, our organization is obviously a healthcare organization. So we have a subset of employees who have to always be live, but the majority, like my team and certainly the purchasing, the accounting, the QA, all those teams are remote. And no one from my team has been in the office for 16 months. In fact, our chief of staff asked me if they could give up their offices so that we could bring in a remote contract team that was working to engage people from underserved communities on the vaccines. So they did that gladly because they were coming in, an hour or so each way to get to the office. They've been very productive, but the people who come in live, the lab workers, the research workers, the people who actually take blood from volunteer donors, they have to come in and be live. So there's this kind of undercurrent that the people who have to and have come in live pretty much through the whole pandemic have a little jealousy, feeling that people like my team, are not working as hard. They have an easy life. I was able to walk home during this and listen to Marty until I got to my computer to log in and see your faces, your smiling faces. But the live workers, so to speak, can't do any of that. So how do you address that?
Yeah,
Marty.
Rich, we struggle with the same thing. Part of our makeup structure of our company is we have people in the main offices, and then we have people out on job sites. And the people out on job sites basically have been out on the job sites since the pandemic started, and the project managers, the people have been live, while us in the main office and the support roles have not been. And it has been a balancing act. It has been a real struggle to understand and to have these difficult discussions with the project managers out on the job sites, or like your people, the people who phlebotomists, the people who take blood, who need to be there, and really encouraging them and understanding that there's it's not two sets of expectations, it's just two sets of roles that you have to embrace and understand. So we as leaders have really been focusing on communication with that live staff, supporting them, having the critical and deep conversations about it, and really encouraging them to understand that it's the dynamics of the workplace, it's the dynamics of the expectations of the client, and it's the dynamics of the expectations of the company, that if a client says, we are open, you are live, you are here, that contractually we are obligated to follow those rules and regulations. Now, are there some that are like, well, I'd love to be at home, sitting by the pool, doing my work as well? Yes, but you have to manage that. You have to manage expectations. We manage it through communication. We manage it through interaction and engagement with them, encouragement. If need be, we're very, very, take vacation, go out, get away from your desk, understand what's going on. And the leadership goes out to these job sites and meets with them and shows them, hey, we're part of the live group too. So yeah, it's been a struggle, but we found that we're able to do it successfully just by being transparent and open and setting the expectations and living the expectations with the workers. But that's another, I've said this a lot, and I think as we move forward, we're going to see there's not really an easy one fit all solution to it, because we've got 45 to 100 people on site. You may have 2,000 on site at different hospitals or whatever. So you've really got to look at it individually and understand the individuals on the job sites or the live people and how they're doing it. And the other thing that has been super critical is the leadership on those sites has to be positive and has to engage and encourage the workers, the people on the job site to to continue to come in and do the best they can, understanding that there's a different expectation for them than maybe the people in the main office. So mid-level and senior management is critical in putting the positive spin and communication and engagement to these people on those job sites. It's been critical for us.
You know, Marty, I hope that, first of all, thank you for that. And Rich, thank you so much for your question. And, you know, as we start wrapping up here, I hope that we could all walk away from this conversation with one simple takeaway. Leadership is a privilege. It's not a job anymore. It's a privilege. And I don't want you to think that just because someone that you've seen lead for the past 30 years is prepared to lead in the age of personalization. Yeah. There's more work. And, you know, we talked earlier, Marty, about how, you know, we work a lot, but I don't know if we're going to start, I don't think that the scaling of work will be in the work itself. I think it'll be in the work of building relationships and trust with the actual people. I think this has all awakened us, I hope, to just how much we never took the time to engage with our people. And here we are having a conversation around something that, quite candidly, we should have mastered years ago. So I just wanted to provide perspective to the discussion. Laura, sorry we don't have a chance to get you back on, but please send your question on your chat and we'll be more than happy to have Marty answer it. Marty, did you want to leave us with one final thought?
You know, I'm going to leave you with my my breakfast discussion that we had earlier. You got to look at leadership and employee engagement like a breakfast plate, right? You go out to eat, you sit down, you've got your eggs, your bacon, your toast, and your hash browns. Leaders have to look and be the bacon, right? Because the chicken is invested in the breakfast, lays the eggs, and you eat them. The pig is all in. So you've got to be the pig in engagement. You've got to be all in. You've got to accept it as a leader. You've got to be all in. You've got to embrace it. And you've got to be nimble and you've got to be flexible. And again, the secret sauce, authentic and sincere.
Thank you, Marty. You've been wonderful. And as we close each show, when you lead in the age of personalization, you will see things that others don't. Do what others won't and keep pushing when prudence says quit. Thank you, everyone. We greatly appreciate all your participation. Fantastic, Marty. Thank you again.
Thanks, everybody.